Wait, remember As Told by Ginger? It was one of Nickelodeon's early 2000s shows that followed around a girl named Ginger who has all the drama surrounding her that comes from being a preteen. While the show never reached the popularity heights of some of the other juggernauts on Nickelodeon at the time, As Told by Ginger still managed to carve out a nice little space that for a lot of people who did tune in to see it, viewed it as more of a comfort show that brought really relatable vibes and a solid look into the experiences of a kid at this age. Well, someone once told me that the grass is much greener on the other side, so let's see if that's true and jump into As Told by Ginger. Nickelodeon was known for having a good mix of shows as a part of their main lineup, but something they were really good at was making these more slice-of-life shows that would follow your fairly average kid who no one understands. Sorry, that's not correct. They would be your fairly average kid, but for the most part, they were able to be understood as they would express what they are going through to the viewer, so you could relate to them. How many times do I have to tell you how much I love Hey Arnold? There's over 7 hours of me expressing that, but whatever. I love the slice of life genre. So what does a show like As Told by Ginger have to offer to it? What aspect of preteen and young teen life could it bring to the table? Well, much like Braceface, which I recently talked about, this would be a show that took a look at this time in a kid's life, transitioning from a kid into a teen, but here done in a way where you really experience the growth. Our main perspective here is through Ginger, as her passion in the show is her writing, and it is the vessel for her to express herself and digest and interpret the world around her. We also get to see the world around her grow much like she does, but not truly having a through-line narrative that demands you watch every episode in chronological order. You do see massive differences from season 1 to season 3. It's something I love to see personally in a slice of life cartoon, and As Told by Ginger does so in such a natural and realistic way. The changes that Ginger herself goes through along with her friends and family is easily one of the best to ever do it to show the passing of time. It's not just for the sake of character development, it's just for the way that life goes. Time passes, people change, you change, and this show captures these moments perfectly. Now, that alone doesn't make it a perfect show, we'll get into all of that, but this point I am bringing up is the exact reason it shines so brightly and stands out on its own from other similar shows. We first meet Ginger as a preteen in the 7th grade as she navigates her day-to-day life in Sheltered Shrubs. And no, that's not a Fortnite dropping spot, it's a fictional town set in Connecticut, and it's important to the creation of the show for reasons that I'll talk about shortly. Ginger's two closest friends are Dodie and Macy, with her closest guy friend being Darren, and they all have a pretty nice dynamic with one another. They all fall into this middle ground of not coming into their own yet. Like at first, Ginger is pretty shy and quiet, Dodie is a motor mouth who wants to be considered more popular, Macy is extremely nerdy and pretty awkward in conversation, and Darren is a chill friend who is stuck in some awful headgear for his teeth and not really able to shine quite like he wants to just yet. After we first understand who these characters are, we see that they all gradually evolve throughout the series, with the biggest standouts being Ginger because, well, she's the main character, and Darren, who probably has the most memorable and in-your-face points of growth, metaphorically and physically. We will talk more about that soon, but As Told by Ginger would really nail in the details to define who these characters are. As Told by Ginger was another show coming from Klasky Csupo, bringing in their unique, weird, and sometimes off-putting form of art style that we've seen in the Rugrats, the Wild Thornberrys, Rocket Power, and Ah Real Monsters. You can basically say that they were the main studio in charge of creating animated shows for the network. In fact, they would just make As Told by Ginger twice when they get to making All Grown Up. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and please don't take that last bit seriously. It's just a joke. Mostly. But the premise and story of the show was created by Emily Kapnick, who already had a history of writing and working with Klasky Csupo on a few of their other productions, but getting to this point in a pretty cool way. You see, back in 1997, Emily would end up winning a competition for her writing, as her premise was As Told by Ginger, and eventually her idea would become a focus for Nickelodeon to want to make a reality. This cool story and moment is preserved thanks to the Nick Mag project, who saved high-quality scans from Nick Magazine. With this issue I'm referring to for this story being from December of 2000's release. Different from the other cartoons on Nickelodeon, As Told by Ginger was made with a slightly older audience in mind. It wasn't aiming for the younger demographic that most of the other Klasky Csupo shows were catered towards, but instead it was targeted at the preteen/young teen group, with As Told by Ginger being a part of Nickelodeon's Teen Nick programming block, which hadn't had any cartoons specifically made for it. This allowed the show to dive a bit deeper into more risque territories within its storytelling. This would help translate the experience a kid would be going through at this specific time in their life and be more grounded and realistic with it, opening up for more understanding of the things you don't yet understand fully at this age. Emily put a lot of herself into the show. I mean, the character of Ginger is a writer just like she was, with the small town in Connecticut being based off of her own experiences growing up in a similar setting in Larchmont, New York. I think it's cool that as a writer, Emily was able to build herself a pretty successful career, and seeing Ginger in the show building herself up and figuring out her own path in life through her writing is a nice level of meta that you'll love to see. The pilot of the show was created in 1999, and despite a few design changes for the characters, there wasn't too much of a difference when the show would officially premiere on October 25th, 2000. Ginger's life comes off pretty average to the normal experience you'd see that someone would have here at this age, as she details her ups and her downs in her journal for us to enter in on what she's going through. She also sings sometimes, but let's not talk about those moments. The strong suit here is just the writing. We get such a huge focus on all of her surrounding friends and family too, and honestly, some of those stories or moments become some of my most memorable and ones that I truly think are great standout parts for the series. I mean, who doesn't remember Macy singing "I'm a little seal girl living in the real world and it's so hard to get by"? You go, Macy. You are the little seal girl. Now, if this were As Told by Jordan, I'd tell you all about how Gamersupps helps give me all the energy I need to stay focused on working on these videos. If you'd like some too, you can head over to Gamersupps by clicking the link in my description, and then by using my code FRINGE, you can get 10% off any purchase you ever make for yourself. There's tons of great flavors, both new and old, and lots of great other things like their shaker cups, merch drops, and so much more. Use my code FRINGE every time you purchase anything from Gamersupps and you'll save 10% off your order. It helps support the channel and you save some money, so use my code FRINGE at checkout. I truly appreciate you. One big divergence from what other shows would do with having a popular character being the main antagonist of the series is that the popular girl here, Courtney, isn't this evil or mean character. She's actually one of the most interesting characters because she is in Ginger's life as someone who comes from wealth and finds Ginger interesting because of how she sees the world and how someone who isn't well off lives their life. But it really becomes the story of Ginger coming into her life as Courtney's understanding of perspective constantly grows with her thanks to being friends with Ginger. Her having to learn what true friendship means, understanding that life isn't just about this privilege and wealth that she's been given by her parents, and so much more. It all just really makes for such a cool character to watch for how she does grow and develop throughout the show. Going back to something I just brought up a moment ago though, there really is no antagonist or villain of the series. Well, okay, there is Courtney's best friend Miranda, but she doesn't ever have a good reason to hate on Ginger the way that she does, and most times it's just that kind of attitude where it's clear that Miranda doesn't want to be friends with Ginger, and she definitely gets jealous because of Ginger and Courtney's friendship, but here she's not really dead set on ruining her life or anything. Miranda just doesn't like her. Moving on though, I do think following the growth of Darren and how his appearance changes and how his friendship with Ginger changes is one of the best aspects of the show. He's kind of like this somewhat nerdy and not super cool guy. He has this ridiculous braces set up and he's super close to Ginger, being her next door neighbor and being there for her. Come season 2 though, things really start changing for him as he is able to get his braces off and thus is able to start gaining some more confidence in himself as he breaks further out of his shell. His appearance and interests start to change too, focusing more on playing football, growing taller, developing more muscle, and even growing his hair out. Like I mentioned, this plays right into how we see these characters grow and change. I mean, you're telling me that this character and this character are the same character? That's just cool to witness and see happen. But his friendship with Ginger really gets to explore how characters can grow apart. Well, first, at one point, Ginger and Darren end up giving it a go at dating one another, where it kind of gets messy. Darren's interests in football and Ginger's focus on academics don't end up mixing together all that well, leading to the relationship to hurt their friendship. Darren ends up getting close to another person and wants to potentially give that a shot, breaking things off with Ginger, as this pushes her to learn how to deal with these emotions and struggle with the distance now put in between these childhood friends. Then, in her immediate sadness from this, her appendix blows up and she has to go have surgery. Yeah, I don't think I know a more dramatic breakup than that. that Ginger's appendix broke up with her too.
Ginger will be right back. Ginger's back.
Ginger's family, though, has their own set of things going on that make for some really interesting stories to follow as well. For the most part, from her family, we follow her younger brother Carl and his best friend Hoodsie, who are a pair of ride-or-die dudes who get into their own fair share of mischief. Anything that focused on them was usually to bring in the weirder and more adventurous elements of Klasky Csupo's animation, as their hobbies include messing with and dealing with weird and gross things because they are young boys and that stuff is really cool for them. They also just pal around and do whatever together. It really just depends on what's happening or what they stumble upon that sets up what their focus is. I do appreciate that it goes beyond this for Carl a lot, as some of his personal stories in the series are kind of sad and heartbreaking. I think that the episode where we see Carl's teacher retire as she's had enough of dealing with Carl and his shenanigans is really sad, but also really good. Carl struggles with no longer having her as a teacher and feels so much remorse in being a part of the reason why she retired, as he then tries to do whatever he can to get her to reconsider and come back, and when she finally does agree, she ends up not returning, as Carl and the rest of the class find out that she passed away. And the episode ends on a shot of Carl processing this information as he starts to tear up. Yeah, it's pretty devastating, but to ease the tension, let me just mention his friend Noelle, who he develops a kind of cool friendship with, and she might just have some superpowers. But that has nothing to do with anything outside of this moment here where Carl and Hoodsie catch her doing this. Ginger's redheaded mother Lois, no, not that redheaded mother named Lois, is a good representation of an adult character in children's media. She comes off very realistic in the sense of her being a single parent and getting to have these really deep talks and moments with Ginger. We get to see how she parents both kids and has the advice to really be there for both of them while also trying to move on with her own life and her love life, giving us a cartoon that showcases a divorced parent from this perspective, having her ups and downs with this as well. At one point, dating a guy named Buzz who ends up moving into the house with his 3 sons, as we then get to see things not work out and fall apart. We also get to see her then build up a relationship with Dr. Dave and see how she finds her happiness with him and where that goes, and we'll get to talk about that more in a bit actually. She also has a transformation throughout the series where we actively see her working on losing weight, and as time goes on, she does. And it's mostly done in a subtle way that just makes it feel like these characters' lives are constantly moving forward, even if we aren't focusing on them at all. But on the other hand of parenthood, we get to see the portrayal of a dad who is not showcased in the best light, both to Ginger and Carl. They both also see him differently. Ginger actively seeks out this better relationship with him despite how often he falls through on keeping his word or just falls short of being there for her, while Carl wants nothing to do with him, seeing him as this stranger who already abandoned them in the past and doesn't really want him to start making things better now. He just pieced out from their lives, and this is a really real and raw take on the relationship that kids have with their parents, or more specifically, divorced parents, and even more specifically, with one of the parents being distant and how that strain on the kids' lives can be felt. As Told by Ginger has a very realistic telling of the world around it and the characters within it. I love that little moments and details change with all of the characters. Aside from them all changing clothes, which I think is so cool and special when a cartoon does this, they all change and grow in general. As Told by Ginger also had a fair share of more heavy topic-based episodes, especially the episode As She Was Gone, where it touches on the topic and discussion of no longer wanting to be alive, being the most notable example to point to from the series, especially for how deep the writing goes here. There's also a lot of moments related to death, kind of like I mentioned with Carl and some people in his life, and the show didn't shy away from talking about these things or allowing the characters to explore what it all means and understand it themselves. Toss all of that in with how we see characters and their family dynamics play out, and you get a pretty intense portrayal of real life sometimes. But it really was never a problem for Nickelodeon. The series was made for that teen Nick audience, so it was fine, for the most part. Things weren't so great for the series behind the scenes, however, so let's take a look at how As Told by Ginger came to a pretty messy end with no fault to the actual show itself. Now, the tragedy with the show is how Nickelodeon would eventually treat it. It went from a very exciting premiere that had a solid viewership and was praised for the topics it would tackle, but as the show went on, the viewership began to decline a bit. The 3rd season of the show saw the worst effects of it, as it would be butchered by around 15 years of Nickelodeon nonsense nonsense. You heard that right, 15 years, roughly. Not only did they just air a handful of the episodes for season 3 on the main channel before cutting it off, when they brought the new remaining episodes over to their side channel Nicktoons, they only ever premiered 2 new ones. One in 2004 and one 2 years later in 2006. That's downright disgusting and disrespectful. But eventually, after 10 years of nothing, and not having about 6 of the episodes ever play on TV, Teen Nick would now be its own thing, playing some nostalgic TV with their The Splat programming block, as 4 new episodes would premiere between October 22nd and 23rd, 2016. A couple years later, in 2021, right before CBS All Access would become Paramount Plus, the final 2 episodes of As Told by Ginger would be released in a more viable way for anyone to watch.
We'll be right back to As Told by Ginger. Now we're back to As Told by Ginger.
Technically, these episodes did get a release back in 2004 as a special DVD release, making the final extended episode of The Wedding Frame into the finale movie, but in a only available on DVD type of situation. So to be fair, it was out there, but until being placed on streaming, it wasn't as easily accessible. Like, what did Ginger ever do to you, Nickelodeon, to deserve this? But whatever, at least it was released back then, and we can talk about it a bit. The Wedding Frame is a big way to end the series, and it makes you feel way more satisfied to see where we leave these characters' stories. I mean, when they advertised this DVD, they sold you on a special sneak peek into Ginger's future. How could you not buy this? In the film, it's mainly focusing on Ginger's mom and her partner in the series, Dr. Dave, getting married, but there is something weird going on as someone is trying to ruin this big day and the relationship as a whole, while Ginger is struggling to deal with the heartbreak from Darren. Breaking up with her and dealing with her mother's wedding is messing with her feelings of knowing and learning what true love actually is. And yeah, this could have all just been any other episode for the series. There's a lot going on, but it's not as interesting as how it all comes to an end here. Remember how I just said that we get that sneak peek into Ginger's future? Well, we sure did, as the ending narration to the series, rather than just being her writing in her journal, is now being read out loud by Ginger to all of her friends and family, as we see that herself and everyone else is now all grown up. There's a Rugrats all grown up joke there I can make, but I digress. We see that life has moved on, and that Ginger even ends up with Darren as an adult, having a child together. This is her official launch of her book that she published with her writings, revealing the name as she finishes it as Told by Ginger. And if you didn't get chills, you're lying. It's honestly a really perfect bookend to the series, no pun intended. It really connects back to Emily for her own journey in life and how her writing a story about Ginger became a large plunge for herself into her career, where she got to fully realize As Told by Ginger, ending it with the closing of one book, that being this show, and the opening of another as Emily would move on, writing and producing on other shows. There's just something so wholesome about it all that makes the series end in a special way that feels way more impactful. And as far as endings go for Nickelodeon cartoons, we don't always get some big end that leaves you on a note that closes off the series. And to have that with Ginger, where we get to see where her life would go and how she ends up finding her way, is kind of amazing. As Told by Ginger really puts a lot out there to deal with in each episode, and it's kind of like a slow burn at times despite being packed with drama and life lessons to learn. So if you want the same thing with a little bit of less character development, something that was not as serious, and gives you characters that you basically already know, Klasky Csupo also had All Grown Up, the Rugrats spin-off / sequel. It feels a lot like the same thing, but I think in watching both of them in full, that you can see the clear differences in both. But for As Told by Ginger, sticking with it and getting to grow alongside these characters really builds you this solid attachment to everyone here, and the want to see where they do end up. It's nice and just honestly comforting to have this closure on the series. I guess the grass was much greener on the other side. Who would have thought? Speaking of thoughts, what are your thoughts on As Told by Ginger? Do you think that the show presented itself in ways that gave a true portrayal of someone at this stage in their life trying to figure things out? Do you think that Hoodsy as an adult here looks like Jonah Hill in the movie War Dogs? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like on this video and to subscribe for more videos coming soon, but until then, later.